Magnus failed. Under the influence of entities of the warp, or due to his own wounded pride and thirst for power, War Master Horus had turned against his father. The presence of Erebus from the Word-Bearers Legion made it clear that his brother Lorgar and the entire 17th Legion had long fallen victim to heresy. This meant that the betrayal ran deeper than he had anticipated, and who knows which other Primarchs were under the sway of chaos. It was imperative to warn the Emperor at all costs, and trusting such a message to usual astropathic communication channels was impossible. To have his father believe him, he needed to speak to him directly. Despite the Emperor's prohibition, Magnus would create a new spell, one that would make his father personally see the evidence of Horus's betrayal, punish the traitors, and lift the restrictions of the Edict of Nicaea. Finally understanding that possessing the powers of the warp and its secrets was a good thing for the Imperium and humanity. The Adeptus Astra Telepathica was created by the Emperor during the preparations for the Great Crusade. He created a massive Astronomicon, and it was specifically the Astra Telepathica that were appointed to support its operation. Due to this, the Astra Telepathica played a crucial role in the Great Crusade, as without their beacon of psychic light, humanity could never have been united. Furthermore, the Astra Telepathica played a key role in the capture of rogue psychers and the Sorcerer Kings that had flooded Terra during the Age of Strife. The Astra Telepathica is divided into two parts: the Recruitment Division, the League of Black Ships, and the Training Division, the Schola Psychona. These divisions answer to the Master of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica and his several hundred senior advisors. They oversee specially trained astropaths who use their mysterious powers to maintain interstellar telepathic communication between all worlds of the Imperium. Astropaths are psychically gifted psychers who have undergone the ritual of soul binding with the Emperor. As a result of this process, a part of the Emperor's will is transferred into his servant, protecting them from malevolent warp entities. Due to this ritual, astropaths lose their sight, although there have been cases where an astropath was recognized as strong enough not to have to undergo the soul binding. Such psychers are considered lucky, for the ritual is quite painful. To send messages through the warp over vast distances, astropaths typically unite into astropathic choirs. Encrypting the messages into a series of sometimes incoherent images, the information is passed through the ocean of psychic energy of the Immaterium. The receiving astropathic choir capturing these images deciphers the message and delivers it to the addressee in familiar text form. The combat troops of the Adeptus Astra Telepathica were the Sisters of Silence, also known as the Divisio Investigatus, or Witch Hunters, young girls immune to psychic abilities. They underwent a multi-level selection and training process, at the end of which they took a vow of silence, thus earning the nickname Silent Sisterhood. Essentially acting as the internal and external investigation department of the organization, their duties included the search for new psychers. The Divisio Investigatus of the Silent Sisterhood became a true curse for psychers. Due to the pariah gene, their mere presence nullified psychic activity, and the sisters themselves were immune to most forms of psychic influence. Thus, the primary goal of the Sisters of Silence was to find and arrest psychers or pass them on for training as astropaths. As warrior investigators, they could resort to any forms of psychic detention and transportation, so the Sisters of Silence could almost always be found as part of Black Ship crews. The main base for the operations of the Sisters of Silence was the Somnus Citadel on Luna. If the Thousand Suns had managed to maintain the gate on Agaru, such a spell would not have been necessary. Magnus could have simply entered the network and emerged from it on Terra. Undoubtedly, there is a gate on Terra. Otherwise, why would his father return to Terra and continue his research? With the aid of the ritual and the power of Thrall Psychers willing to sacrifice their lives for the Thousand Suns, Magnus directed his ethereal body into the warp. His psychic powers were insufficient to reach Terra, but this was not required. Magnus managed to find a part of the webway discovered on Agaru, not without the help of mysterious warp entities. He broke through and rushed into the Golden Network. Without wasting a moment, the Primarch charted a course to Terra and surged forward on Terra. Deep beneath the Imperial Palace, the Emperor was working on the most important and grandiose project in the history of humanity, in which an ancient artifact found during the Dark Age of technology played a key role. Little is known about the times long before the founding of the Imperium, when humanity first colonized other worlds. This period is now known as the Dark Age of Technology. At that time, humanity reached this peak of scientific and technological development. Man walked the galaxy as a conqueror and explorer, conquering territories of unimaginable size, stepping among the stars like a god, overthrowing infinitely old alien empires, and transforming countless planets into habitable worlds. This did not last long. Through a series of scattered robotic uprisings, a war against artificial intelligence began. Machines attacked their creators, and never before or after did the galaxy see such a war in which the devices of the Dark Age devoured stars along with space and time. Humanity, at an enormous cost, managed to defeat the Iron Men, depleting its resources. Times of hardship ensued, coinciding with growing unrest in the warp. And one night, an empire the size of the galaxy was plunged into anarchy, barbarism, and horror. Warp storms engulfed the cradle of humanity, and the realm of men collapsed. The long millennia that followed became known as the Age of Strife, or the Long Night. During these long years, the worlds of man, shrouded in a veil of horror and darkness, remained prey to demons and aliens until the Emperor's savior arrived. From those times, many artifacts remained, mysterious machines and mechanisms, secret knowledge, and dangerous research. Remembering the machine rebellions, the Emperor imposed a ban on many technologies, particularly prohibiting any research into artificial intelligence. Some artifacts the ruler of humanity thoroughly studied and adapted for his projects for the benefit of the Imperium. One of them became a massive cybernetic mechanism using advanced biomechanical technology, capable of enhancing extrasensory abilities. The core of the device, which would become the Golden Throne, whose exact purpose during the Dark Age of Technology remains unknown, was discovered by the Emperor in the 30th millennium during the Unification Wars on Terra, buried deep under a vast and inhospitable desert in Asia. For the Golden Throne, its main mechanism the throne was later built around, the Emperor found an original use. It could serve as a portal into the webway of the Eldar. The key element was the psychic power of the Emperor, amplified by the throne, or any other psyker of equivalent strength, containing the warp similar to a Gela field in the artificially created mechanicum passageways between the portal on Terra and the webway. From the Golden Throne, the Imperium was meant to guide humanity through the webway, capable of sheltering from the dangers of warp travel and the malevolent entities dwelling within, allowing communication across the galaxy through a network of conduits instantly. Who created the mysterious webway on the boundary between worlds is unknown. We only know that the dying Eldar civilization actively used it, building cities, transport hubs, and strongholds within, ensuring mobility in movement. Having resolved the problem of webway access through the Golden Throne systems, the Emperor intended to seize the webway for the benefit of the human civilization. The Great Work, as close associates named this project, was never completed, due to an incident caused by the mistakes of the 15th Legion. Bursting forth like a fiery monster from the depths of the Emperor's secret creation, the Primarch of the 15th Legion of the Thousand Suns, Magnus the Red, found himself before his father upon the psychic impact of Magnus's spell. Part of the linking system between the webway and the Golden Throne was destroyed. Extraordinarily complex stabilizers and workshop absorbers melted into a single mass. This was a catastrophe. He intended to warn his father, convey everything he had seen and learned, but none of that mattered. No words of his could outweigh or rectify the colossal mistake of visiting Terra. Compared to the devastation he unknowingly caused in the laboratory, Horus's betrayal faded into the background. Charms that safeguarded the palace for centuries were destroyed in an instant, and a wave of psychic energy killed thousands of people, with hundreds more driven insane, committing suicide. But this was not even the worst. The worst was the awareness of his own mistake. Everything he had believed in was a delusion. He thought he had surpassed his father in mastering the powers of the great ocean. He believed that he had learned to control its might, but on the ruin of his father's greatest work, he comprehended the truth. A silent conversation took place between the Emperor and Magnus. Everything Magnus had done was revealed, and everything the Emperor planned was laid bare. The Primarch saw himself sitting on the Golden Throne, utilizing its incredible power to direct humanity towards dominion over the entire galaxy. He was to be the chosen tool of his father to achieve ultimate victory, and it was unbearably painful for him that his thoughtless arrogance shattered this dream. Devoid of his will, the spell that drew Magnus to Terra lost its strength, and his astral body rushed back to his form on Prospero, back along the Golden Network to the breach he had so thoughtlessly torn in its fabric. There were already vast flocks of warp predators gathering, swirling armies of amorphous monsters and bloodthirsty creatures living only for destruction. Hordes of monsters materialized in the webway, rushed past the protection destroyed by the spell's psychic impact to the portal leading through the webway's network to the heart of Terra. Will his father be able to hold them back? Magnus was consumed by shame over the blood he had spilt. Now a deserved punishment awaited him. Now he would face retribution for violating the Edict of Nicaea, for disobeying his father, for destroying his greatest work in the depths of the Terran laboratory. Now, the Emperor would unleash his wolves upon his homeworld Prospero, and the Wolf King would come for him, sowing pain and ruin. Horus held the title of War Master not merely because he was the Emperor's longest-serving or favored son. Above all, the warlord was a genius of tactics and strategy, a visionary diplomat, a cunning manipulator, and a mighty warrior without peer among his brothers. He was well aware of the dangers of waging war against the Imperium, even with superior forces. Calculating a favorable outcome in open confrontation with a man like the Emperor was impossible. Horus would never have dared such a move without seeing a chance for victory through the unknown gods of chaos and the opportunities offered by such an alliance. Horus needed to sway as many forces as possible. On his side were already the Word-Bearers Legion, led by Lorgar, who had performed a massive amount of work. Propaganda campaigns and other legions, secret constructions of super-powerful ships, worlds under the influence of chaos ready to throw millions of cultists into battle at Lorgar's command. But this was insufficient for the enterprise Horus envisioned. The loyalty of the Imperial Army and Navy attached to the Legion was easy to ensure thanks to the War Master's popularity and undeniable authority among the troops. Although people like Army Commander Hector Varvus would never betray the Emperor. Such individuals would need to be removed before any active measures were taken. The wars of the Great Crusade were extremely perilous, and who knew what might happen to a commander in the heat of battle. The upcoming war would require resources. Hence, the warlord secured the support of the upper echelons of the Mechanicum on Mars, led by Fabricator General Kelbor Hal. Many Mechanicum were dissatisfied with their relationship with the Administratum on Terra. Initially, it was to be an alliance of equals, but in fact, Mars became a vassal of the Imperium. The Emperor promised broad autonomy, equality between Terra and Mars, but the implicit message was clear. Join me, or we will destroy you all. No matter the cost. The War Master won the loyalty of many in the Adeptus Mechanicus by skillfully playing on their ambitions and disagreements with the Imperium. He also gave them lost secrets from the Dark Age of technology, which had been obtained in the worlds of the Aurelian technocracy, against which the sons of Horus waged war. Horus's emissaries and spies told the tech priests that the Emperor planned to steal the secret technologies of Mars's Mechanicum, and even enslave all the tech priests. Additionally, Horus exploited ideological rifts among the Mechanicum. Some believed the Emperor to be the earthly embodiment of the Omnissiah, while others thought the Omnissiah was actually buried on Mars, and the Emperor presented himself as their god to gain power over them, making them his servants. All of this was crucial, but the primary goal remained recruiting his Primarch brothers willing to support him in this alliance against the Emperor. Such an ally, without a doubt, was the Primarch of the 12th Legion, the World Eaters, Angron. When the Primarchs was scattered across the galaxy, Angron found himself on the civilized human world of New Syria, far from Terra. Found barely alive and bleeding among the aliens he had slain, he was discovered by a slaver. The slain aliens, the Eldar, had attacked the young Primarch, perhaps because they foresaw the terrible deeds he was destined to commit. The slaver decided that such a strong warrior should not die in this backwater. Angron was turned into a slave. The slaves were implanted with a relic technology of the Dark Age, known as the Butcher's Nails. These implants enhanced the warrior's aggression and combat strength, turning him into a fairy-filled killer. Angron became a famous gladiator in the capital of Deshea. He once managed to raise a rebellion among the gladiators and gathered a significant army of slaves to rise against the planet's High Lords, crushing all armies sent against him. The City Eaters advanced deeper into the planet. However, Angron could not capitalize on his successes and overthrow the Lords of Deshea. Just as 7 armies surrounded his position, a battle began. Coincidentally, the Emperor of Mankind arrived in orbit above New Syria with his fleet, teleporting into the fortress with a squad of custodies. The Emperor promised Angron a legion made in his likeness, immortality, and the opportunity to perfect his art of war endlessly. To the Emperor's surprise, Angron refused, choosing death alongside his fellow gladiators who fought against their oppressors. The Emperor, taken aback, returned to his flagship. However, as the battle commenced, the Emperor, against Angron's will, transported him aboard his ship, leaving Angron to watch helplessly as his brothers were annihilated. Angron eternally harbored hatred for the Emperor for this. Initially, the Primarch wanted nothing to do with the 12th Legion. When several officers attempted to speak with him, he killed them brutally. Ultimately, only a Captain Khan of the 8th Company managed to establish contact, explaining the link between Angron's gladiators and the Astartes of the Warhounds. Recognizing his mastery, Angron accepted command over the Legion, renaming them the World Eaters. The World Eaters, initially known as the Warhounds, were the 12th of the original 20 legions. Likely, the first members of the 12th were recruited from the most aggressive members of the tribes and cities brought into compliance by the Emperor. From the beginning, they were regarded as an extremely aggressive, fierce, and merciless army. Perhaps for this reason, after the first battle, they were held in reserve. But the Emperor finally unleashed the Hounds on a rebellious colony, Cerberus, and thereafter assigned them to the 13th Expeditionary Fleet, in which they demonstrated their prowess as assault troops. Nonetheless, issues arose. Occasionally, they attacked allied forces that crossed into their path during battle. The War Council decided stricter discipline would resolve the Legion's issues. Over time, the War Council began to utilize the Legion's savage fury, sending them into battles requiring total enemy annihilation, shock assaults, planet-destroying missions, exterminatus, breaking through fronts, and melee combat. Because of this, they earned the nickname the Bloody 12th. The Butcher's nails were irremovable through surgery. In solidarity with Angron after reuniting, all legionaries began receiving similar implants, turning the Legion into a frenzied mob of power-armored Astartes. They disregarded tactics and strategy in favor of brute force, completely ignoring their ever-growing losses. Frequently, the Legion would resort to the slaughter of civilians. Many within the 12th Legion began openly hating Angron for what the Legion became after reuniting with the Primarch. Imperial commanders often requested reinforcements from other legions upon learning they were to fight alongside the World Eaters. a frenzied legion under a broken Primarch. That was the reputation of the 12th Legion, held at the onset of the heresy among other Astartes and Primarch brothers. Fueled by Angron's hatred for the Emperor and simply unleashing his constant thirst for battle and blood during the Aurelian campaign, Horus easily gained the World Eaters as allies. The warlord continued his covert diplomatic and subverse activities, always aware that his plans could be disrupted by the too-knowing Magnus the Red. Luckily for Horus, Magnus's reckless actions invited the Emperor's wrath. The warlord intercepted the order from Terra, destroyed the 15th Legion, and delivered the Primarch to the Emperor's palace, alive. A meeting between Magnus and the Father was not part of the warlord's plan. Horus often noted that his undeniable advantage lay in his ability to turn any situation to his benefit. With the gods of chaos as allies, all that was needed was a few corrections to the Emperor's order, transforming a convoy into executioners. We can state with certainty that the grim task of arresting Magnus was originally entrusted to Captain General of Legio Custodes Constantine Valador, under whose command the troops gathered on Terra. However, the overall leadership of the incriminating army, as the fleet would later be named, was given to Leman Russ, the Primarch of the 6th Legion, the Space Wolves, for only a Primarch could grant power over another Primarch. Leman Russ, like his brothers, was cast onto one of the multitude of planets in the galaxy, the tectonically unstable Fenris, located in the northwest of the galaxy, whose population was living through the early Iron Age. As legends say, he was chosen by a Fenrisian she-wolf and grew up with 2 wolf brothers, Freki and Gary. He came to humanity only in his youth, was adopted by a king, and after the death of his adoptive father, he took the throne. He became famed as a great warrior and wise leader. The Emperor, who arrived on Fenris, did not recognize Leman as an equal and challenged him to a contest. He did, however, manage to out-eat and out-drink him, but lost in single combat. By defeating Russ, the Emperor earned his loyalty and took an oath, and Leman Russ became the Primarch of the 6th Legion of the Space Marines, the Space Wolves. In the Imperium, the Primarch of the Space Wolves bore a reputation as a barbarian, at least partly skillfully supported by others. Among his brothers, he did not seek friendship. He did not regret, given the peculiarities of his legion, yet he inspired genuine respect as a fierce fighter and a faithful hound of the Emperor. The 6th Legion of Space Wolves, or as they named themselves, the Pack, was relatively small in numbers, due to the limited recruitment of warriors and the cloistered specifics of the Pack. The Space Wolves were notoriously savage across the Imperium, not recognizing authorities other than their Primarch, their warlords, and of course the Emperor. However, their barbarism was deceptive. Quickly adapting to any opponent, the Wolves were famous for their sudden forays, tracking and destroying, pursuit operations, punitive and extermination campaigns. Because of these traits, the 6th Legion was ideal in the first against the Emperor's enemies, both external and internal. For it is known that the Wolves of Russ were used to destroy at least one of the original 20 legions, whose unknown Primarch drew the Emperor's ire. The Wolves were exceptionally suitable because they stood out among all other legions and militias of the Imperium, having neither comrades' bonds nor oaths of loyalty to anyone but the Emperor himself. The Wolves did not create new peoples or guard only a few worlds. They did not erect fortresses or set examples for others, leading armies into battle or marching proudly into the flames of combat. They were, as the Legion's name implies, predators lurking in the dark and obedient only to one master. Indeed, the Space Wolves existed solely for one purpose: to completely destroy any threat dangerous enough to draw their attention. The assembling of the 6th Legion's incriminating fleet, Russ welcomed by the custodian contingent of Valador on Beta Garmin. Of course, this was not an invading army, but rather an honorable escort for Magnus, to teach others a lesson for disobeying the Emperor's orders. The assembling of the 6th Legion's incriminating fleet, Russ welcomed by the custodian contingent of Valador on Beta Garmin. Of course, this was not an invading army, but rather an honorable escort for Magnus, to teach others a lesson for disobeying the Emperor's orders. But Russ was not met only by custodians. Astartes in the green sea blue colors, recently adopting a new name, the Sons of Horus. By the War Master's orders, these units arrived to aid the Wolf King in his task, and their leader, Warden Boros Kern, brought Leman Russ a personal message from Horus. The exact contents of that message will never be known to the researchers of the late Imperium. Most likely, Horus managed to convince Russ that Magnus, together with the warp-twisting beasts, was plotting against their father. And with his magic, he destroyed the secret work for which the Magnates of humanity had to abandon the campaign. Perhaps the Red Coulted even intended to kill the Emperor he loved. After reading the message and hearing his brother's words, Leman Russ informed his sons that now he intended not merely to take Magnus into custody, but to kill him on the spot. For this bloody goal, Horus sent not only warriors under Boros Kern, outfitted with the best weapons and armor available to the Imperium soldiers, but also 12 titans of the Legio Mortis from the sanctuaries on Beta Garmin. The Crimson King learned not only his mistake, but upon seeing a demon in the reflection with which he confronted on Agar, Magnus understood the full depth and horror of the conspiracy of Chaos Gods against his father, and what role he himself, rebelling against his father's plans, unwittingly played. Two such powerful legions, wrapped in intrigue and plots, must destroy each other. Magnus clearly understood this. All a Primarch of 1,000 Suns could do was resign himself to his fate. In the coming war, the Emperor would need his wolves. Magnus ordered the orbital defenses around Prospero to be lifted, and the fleet moved to the outskirts of the system, where our combat battle barges of the 6th Legion fleet already appeared. However, the commanders of the 9th Brotherhood of the 1,000 Suns did not wish to be exterminated, and, breaking the order, began organizing the defense of the capital, the city of Tiski. In response, the Guard of the Spires of Prospero rose to alert. Battle companies of the Brotherhoods hastily dug in, preparing for active defense. The incriminating fleet did not meet resistance in orbit, but the city will not surrender. Rumor has it that just before the assault, Leman Russ tried to contact Magnus and prevent violence, but nothing could break the cunning plan of the Dark Gods. And after the orbital bombardment of Prospero, Leman Russ led his wolves into attack. The 6th Legion was reinforced by the warriors of the Custodian Guard, each Custodian cutting through the Astartes battle lines with ease. Yet the 1,000 Suns were renowned for their abilities. Battle magic inflicted catastrophic losses on the wolves and custodian soldiers. At a moment, the scattered brotherhoods of the 15th Legion managed to push back the attackers. It seemed nothing could break through the blazing fire from the warp. But against them stood space wolves, known not only for their ferocity and strength, but also for their ability to adapt to any condition and opponent. The 6th Legion learned from its encounter with the Thousand Suns on Sarakuti, so black ships with divisions of the Sisters of Silence of the Divisio Investigatus were included in the incriminating fleet. The presence of these warriors undermined the psychic powers of the defenders and forced them to fight with ordinary weapons. In these clashes, the soldiers of the 15th Legion had no chance to withstand the blows of the Wolf Terminators and the renowned Custodies. Fighting the Thousand Suns were pushed back to the final threshold near the Great Pyramid of Tiski, where Magnus would still take his last stand. Legends of this duel were passed through the ages among the pack of the 6th Legion. The Crimson King, meeting the Wolf King in a deadly duel, was defeated. His physical body was destroyed by Leman Russ, who broke his spine. Before his death, Magnus cast one last spell, and to his astral body, with a handful of warriors, he managed to flee into the warp. By irony, from the 15th Legion of the Thousand Suns, only 1,000 Astartes remained. The Legio Custodes would return to Terra, where a completely different war awaited them. Knowing which Constantine Validor would do everything possible to bring the Primarch of 1,000 Suns alive, Space Wolves, having suffered heavy losses, quickly left to burn Prospero. Leman Russ still did not know of Horus's heresy, but standing on the ruins of Tiski and analyzing what had happened, he suspected that he had become a pawn in a multi-layered intrigue of unknown forces leading to this tragedy, and that the battle on Prospero was the first but far from the last battle in a war where the Astartes would kill Astartes, where brothers would once again duel brother, and where the death of the Thousand Suns Legion became a grim omen of an era of darkness.